Well, hey, howdy, hi. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by to join me today. I really do appreciate it. My name is Ellie and I'm a witch, and this over here is my teaching assistant, Andy, and today is Sunday, and on my channel, that means it is Legends and Lore. So I've been gone for a hot minute now, and I don't want to bog down the intro with, an explanation of all of that because there's a lot that I want to talk about, but at the end of the video, if you stick around for that, then I'll explain where I've been and kind of everything like that. This is a little bit of a different video though, because I am not going to be talking about cryptids from a specific state. I actually kind of want to get away from doing just that. I enjoy talking about cryptids, don't get me wrong, I really do enjoy it, and that's why I've done it, that's why I created the series, but it's just not formatted in a way that I'm interested in doing it anymore. So I am going to stop doing it by state every week or every other week like that. I'm kind of just going to talk about what I want to talk about. They're not necessarily cryptids, maybe it's more mythological creatures or aliens or something like that, which is kind of why I rebranded it from Cryptid Countdown to Legends and Lore, so I can kind of talk about whatever I want to talk about. But with that, this video is actually going to be stories on 3 different creatures, and they're just going to be anecdotes from other people. So yeah, let's jump into the video. Okay, so to start, I don't live in the middle of nowhere by any means. I mean, I live down a dirt road, but kind of near civilization. But due to that, we have a family of deer that visit regularly, and we have trail cameras to catch what animals visit. Deer are one that freak me out at night, though, because of these skinwalker legends, but also not deer stories. I've not seen a not deer, thank God, but anytime I see a deer on the property, the idea that it might be a not deer kind of keeps me wary. But here are some people's encounters with the ominous not deer. Okay, so I'll start off by mentioning I live in Oregon. Not quite a rural town, but our town is small and only about a 10-minute drive from what you would actually consider a rural town or area. Everyone's heard about the cryptids and lore of Oregon woods. I hate these woods. They're just vast and terrifying, but at the same time tempting and beckoning almost. I stay out of the woods. I don't hunt or fish, and I might go hiking once every couple of years with friends, but I make it a point to not go where I don't feel safe. I kind of brushed off all those stories about the woods here until I had an experience of my own, and I'm ready to share what I saw that night. My friend and I work graveyard shifts at a local bakery, and we always carpool. She picks me up at around 11:30 p.m. The bakery itself is in a more rural area, but the main road in town takes us almost all the way out there. It's a well-lit road until you get slightly out of town, and since it's the main road through town, even at night, there's usually passing cars or people walking. From my house, it takes about 10 minutes to get to work using this road. For about 3 months, this road was being repaved. We'd have to stop literally right before the turn into the bakery to wait for the construction crew to finish whatever project they were doing. After 2 nights of being stopped right outside of work for over an hour, and an estimated date of construction being done being 3 months out, we decided to start taking the back roads to work. The back way to work was on the opposite side of town of this main road. It took us out of town, around the outskirts of the town, and finally to the bakery for a total of about 30 minutes travel time. The back way to work was on the opposite side of town of this main road. It took us out of town, around the outskirts of town, and finally to the bakery for a total of 30 minutes travel time instead of 10. This back road was completely surrounded by heavy woods. It was a private drive to a house every 5 miles or so, no streetlights, no passing cars, no pedestrians. This road was also extremely curvy, just constant twists and turns. As expected, we see a lot of deer and the occasional possum, squirrel, etc. This particular night, we started our journey through the back roads just as we had been all week. About 10 miles through when my friend went around this bend and then suddenly slammed on her brakes. I was on my phone, so I wasn't looking up when she saw it first. I looked up, and right in front of the car was this gigantic buck. I'm talking huge. Not moose-sized, but definitely one of the largest bucks I'd ever seen. He was staring directly at us through the windshield. We were kind of frozen for a moment for some reason. We both looked down at the feet of the deer, and in between its front feet was a dead raccoon. It was clearly a raccoon. Its face was pointed towards us, ringlets on the tail, basically a stereotypical raccoon. Except this thing was also huge. Now the buck was large, but large bucks aren't unheard of. This raccoon was the size of a huge dog, like the size of a mastiff. Looked back up at the deer and it was still staring right at us, like it was making eye contact with us both. My friend flashed our high beams and honks the horn in hopes to scare it off. It doesn't run off. Without breaking eye contact with us, it starts to walk towards the car slowly. We both are freaked out at this point, and my friend throws the car in reverse, backs up, and swerves around the deer. This time, it moves its head to keep eye contact as we back up, pull to the side, and drive away. We look back behind us, and this thing is just standing in the road staring at us as we drive away. We finally went around a curve and I lost sight of it, but until then, it never stopped staring right at us. We talk about this a lot and how weird it was. I didn't think deer ate meat. Not a deer expert, I just assumed they were herbivores. So the standing over that dead raccoon was the most unsettling part, even over the constant eye contact. Luckily, we weren't dumb enough to get out of the car, but I always wondered what would have happened if we did. Since then, I've been more aware of the lore around here. I've heard unsettling noises and screams coming from the woods, but this was the only actual encounter I think I've had. Am I thinking too much into this, or is it a little too weird to anyone else? There's so many legends and stories of cryptids around here, and I'm sure you've all read about the effed up stuff that happens at Crater Lake. Just thought this might be an interesting encounter for someone to hear. No one else really believes us, but it's hard to believe something you didn't see with your own eyes. Before I read the next one, I just want to clarify, and for anybody in the audience who didn't know, deer are not strictly herbivores. There is no such thing as a strictly herbivore creature. Any herbivore is also opportunistic carnivores. Deer are known to eat snakes and other deer, and so they eat meat. So just in case anybody didn't know that, they do in fact eat meat. Anyway, this next story is in the form of an interview, so I'm gonna still ask the questions that the interview asked just because it adds information. So not deer. I'll go into a little bit of general folklore. Generally speaking, you find not deer in the Appalachians, not the Rockies, which is where I lived, but there have been more recent sightings. Some people claim this is because, the story of not deer has spread so far within American myth culture that people are starting to see them everywhere. I only know what I have actually encountered, which is, usually speaking, not deer. They're called that because you look at them and you're like, is that a deer? And then you see it move, or you notice some aspect of it and you're like, oh, that is not a deer. That's the best way to describe it. They tend to have a variety of different attributes depending on which kind you see. The most common one that really freaks people out is the not deer with forward-facing eyes, because deer are a prey species. Their eyes are on the sides of their heads, and as a result, if they look at you from the sides, turning their heads so that they can see a clearer view of you. When you see a deer that is looking directly at you and there is reflective light in its eyes as it's looking at you, one, that means it has a reflective film on its eyes designed for seeing in low light, which is a predator thing, and two, it's looking directly at you with both eyes forward facing. They don't have those, so that is, again, one of those moments of, is that a deer? And then it looks at you, and you're like, oh, that's not a deer. The interviewer asked, so is the one you saw like that? I've seen a few. I've seen some like that. Other ones where some of them have sharp canines or predator teeth that you'll see, especially if they open their mouth or whatever. Other ones are where they'll just move wrong. You'll see a deer and it will move and you're like, you're not supposed to move like that. Your legs really shouldn't be bending that way. Generally speaking, you see them in ones or twos, but if you see them in a group, it's a lot more dangerous. The group ones tend to be more of the predator-focused design. That's the best way I can describe that, is that if you see a group of them and they have either sharp teeth or forward-facing eyes or some combination of the two, it's dangerous. Avoid those. The general consensus is that when you see one, get away from it, because either it's actually a not deer or it's a deer that's very, very sick. In both cases, that would be extremely dangerous. I think my most vivid memory of one was when I had seen a few here and there living up in Auburn, which is in California. It's just below the snow line on the mountains into Tahoe, and during the fall months, it gets extremely foggy there, dangerously foggy. I can't see 5 feet in front of me foggy at times. So I was driving home from where I was working across the fields and all that. And at the time, that just meant it was like driving through a sea of fog. There was the road a little bit in front of me, and that I could see, and then fog, like a downwards fog, tilt across the field on either side of me. So it looked like a raised platform running across a sea of fog. When I get back home, up into the mountains, I go to park my car, and I get out, and I notice there's a bunch of deer across the road. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. A bunch of deer nearby. They probably didn't notice me because of the fog. But then I realized that they were A, looking at me, and B, coming towards me, and again, my car lights were still on, so I could see the reflective tint in their eyes. And I'm like, nope, I don't like that. Not a fan of that. At which point I very quickly, while keeping an eye on them, went from my car over up the steps into the house, opened the door, got into the house, and closed the door, and then locked it. And I let my roommate at the time know, and we looked out the window, and they were there, and then they were leaving, and then they stopped to look back at us. Again, those eyes should not have been looking at us the way they were, and that was very concerning. Other small moments I've had are things like, walking home from going to like the gas station to grab something small or whatever, and seeing a deer, which turned out to be a not deer, just like off in the forest or somewhere nearby. I know one I saw, I looked at it like, oh, that's a weird number of legs, must be 2 deer. And then it walked away and it had like 6 legs, and I'm like, cool, that's a single deer with 6 legs. Don't like that. Yeah, again, that's the experience of the not deers looking at it going, is that a deer? Nope, that's not a deer. Interviewer asked, is it only the ones with the forward-facing eyes that seem aggressive? Sometimes get ones that are just like malformed looking, though often people say that these are not actually not deer, but these are deer that have a certain kind of there's a disease they can get from I think ticks, which causes cancerous growths on their horns and face. And often people say that the ones that look funky are just diseased deer. It also affects their behavior. The interviewer asks, okay, can you describe the physical appearance of them other than the forward-facing eyes? Were they just regular deer-looking things? That's the thing, for most intents and purposes, they look exactly like a deer. And then there is an aspect or two of them that you notice that's very distinctly not a deer. It's kind of the equivalent of seeing a dog and be like, oh, is that a dog? And turning around and seeing it has cat eyes and you're like, that's not supposed to be there. The interviewer asks, are there stories of them trying to enter houses? Yeah, mostly around the Appalachians is stuff like if you're home alone, people have stated. I cannot obviously talk to the validity of it, yada yada yada. Stated that being followed by not deer, getting home, being alone, and then having an attempt to break down the back door, stuff like that. Interviewer asks, was there anything unusual about the night that you saw them outside your house? Was it a full moon? Was it some kind of... It was foggy as hell, so I could not have told you. Again, extreme fog, that's most often you mostly see them in the low light visibility conditions, which if they're a predator species would make sense that they'd want concealment. Though again, people have seen them, especially around the Appalachians, they see them all year round. The interviewer asked, how did the interaction with the not deer that night make you feel? Unsettled? Honestly, look, I've lived around enough deer in my life to know what a deer is like. When I lived down in Lafayette, we would get a deer that would come down into our drive because we lived in a little house with a bunch of other houses. There was a long driveway into the place where I was, and there's houses on all sides, basically. And occasionally you'd get a deer that would wander down there and then eat food, and you'd come out in the morning and they'd basically be trapped inside the front gate area, and then they'd run past you and get out. Deer are skittish. They, generally speaking, want to effing avoid you. So to have a deer that looks aggressive and has eyes in directions in places it shouldn't look at you and then approach you, not a great feeling. That's the opposite of all behaviors that deers should be having. The interviewer asked, has your interactions with the not deer that night had any lasting impact on you or changed the way you behave in the area? Generally speaking, when I was living around that area, it was cool when it was super foggy out. Be more cautious, that's about it. Stick to a bright lit area, stuff where you've got significant visibility. That just seems like a fair thing to tell anyone to do regardless. The interviewer asks, why do you think they don't crop up on things like dash cams more often? Honestly, I don't know. It's one of those things of again, they seem to show up in low visibility environments. I'm willing to bet a lot of times if someone would show you a dash cam footage of something in low light visibility, someone would say, oh, it's just that it's hard to see, and so you're making stuff up in your mind. That seems if that's the argument for any cryptid that people see, it's oh, it happened in a time frame where it was hard to see, yada yada yada. Going into a place that's a little bit less creepy, I wanted to share some lighthearted encounters I found with fairies or fae. When I moved into my current house, my hammer disappeared. The logical conclusion is that it ended up in one of the boxes. I had a second hammer in my toolbox. I used that, and it also disappeared. I searched all over and got frustrated and bought a brand new hammer. There is a saying, once is an anomaly, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. Sure enough, that third hammer went missing as well. About that same time, I was seeing a little blur out of the corner of my eye. I figured about a foot to a yard tall, brown with a light brown vest. Never still enough to see details and always gone right after I noticed it. I'd done a little googling and the fae, brownies, fit the description and behavior. It seems it didn't like that I was banging and hammering nails for pictures. I got some nuts, honey, raisins, and set out an offering and stated I was new here and want to be a good neighbor. Found all 3 hammers the next day. Okay, just want to share this story, not mine, but it happened to my sister and my nephew, so I know it's true as they both shared the same story and they don't have to lie to me about anything. I am from Puerto Rico. We have a lot of rivers all over the island, and sometimes we go and take the family and enjoy the day swimming and just having fun at a certain location. This particular day, she went with her partner at the time and my nephews. They're having a good time, and my sister needed something that was back in the vehicle that was parked on the main road. So her oldest son went with her, and he got ahead of her and got into the vehicle to get what she wanted. She keeps walking towards him, and all of a sudden, she felt weird and froze. She doesn't know if it was being forced to be still or if she stopped on her free will, but there she was, standing still on the road, analyzing and trying to make sense of what's going on. She said there was a weird smell. I asked her if it was a bad or repulsive smell. She said it wasn't, and that it was more like a sweet smell, different but not bad. She also told me that she was looking and trying to make sense of what was going on her surroundings. She was still on the same road, but it felt different somehow, and she kept hearing these buzzing sounds and seeing these flashes or shadows moving real fast around her. Then something stopped in front of her. That thing stopped and let her see it. She described it as a fairy. Walt Disney-like, but not as beautiful. She said it wasn't heinous or ugly looking, but it wasn't pretty either, and it wasn't really small. The thing stood there in front of her for a few seconds and then went back to whatever it was doing, and then she looked at her son, and he was still far away from her, and he screamed, "Mom, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" She told him yes, and they realized they were gone, and then they went back to the river and resumed their day as if nothing had happened. They talked about it days later, and she told me, but for some reason they didn't really discuss it in detail. What really got my attention is that then she sent me screenshots of something she saw on a Facebook that resembled what she saw. I was just wondering if anyone else had this type of experience. When I was around 11, I got into fairies, but more in a witchy way, I guess you could say. I realized that kind of odd for a kid to be into things like this, but you gotta know I was a very imaginative, somewhat lonely kid. I've always loved fairies, and my mom got me a book to read on them. It included fairy language and a list of gifts to offer fairies should you wish to interact with them. Of course, I wanted to contact them. What little girl wouldn't? For about a month, I wandered out to my backwoods by a river because, according to the book, fairies like to hang out around water and leave little notes written in the supposed language, along with little gifts and offerings. I'd make them little leaf baskets, carry them candy or flowers, things like that. I even recited a chant. I think part of me knew it was silly and that I'd probably never get results, but damn if I wasn't determined, so I kept on. At one point, my gifts and notes started disappearing from the bench I left them on. I figured it was the wind or birds taking it, but a small part of me hoped it was something else. A month of this nonsense and I was getting very discouraged. I decided to leave a few more gifts for them, and this time I weighed them down with small rocks so they wouldn't blow away and I'd know for sure. A day went by and my gifts were still there. Another day, same thing. Then on the third day of checking, I found the gifts gone, but the rocks still there. Only the rocks were moved around. I don't remember how soon after this happened, but eventually I got what I wanted. I wandered into the woods and saw by the river 2 monarch butterflies. They were very large, and I wanted to see them up close. However, one landed on a branch close to the path where I was standing, and I noticed this butterfly had limbs. Tiny, thin, pale limbs. Hands, feet. I stopped dead in my tracks and looked hard to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. It was broad daylight, and I could see very clearly it wasn't a butterfly, it was a fairy. She had long, thin, brown hair that went down past her feet, and a blue dress that looked like a small scrap of fabric. But what terrified me above all else was her face. Her eyes were giant, black, bug, alien-like eyes. But she definitely had a face, and she definitely saw me. I didn't even try to look at the other one because I ran. I was so scared that I bolted home and locked my door. After freaking out and keeping an eye on the backyard, the backwoods, through the window, I went back. No surprise, they were gone, and I never saw them again, despite me trying over and over again. My gifts were never taken again. I felt sad and stupid because I felt like I ruined my chance to have fairy friends, but knowing what I know now, it was probably a blessing that left me alone. What do you guys think? Has anyone seen a fairy and did they look like this? I just need to find someone else who has seen what I've seen. It's something I'll never forget. I remember her so clearly I could draw her. Alright, let's end with 2 different stories about my least favorite creatures. There is a small correction that I would like to make in reference to previous videos. I incorrectly said that Wendigos and Skinwalkers are cryptids. It seems that they are not considered cryptids, so I won't refer to them as such going forward. Back to this video. I hate that these next 2 stories take place in Arizona and close to where I used to live. Anyways, Skinwalkers. I decided to join my bestie Karen for a 3-day stay at her grandmother's place on the res. Her grandmother lives near a place called Tuba City, Arizona, in the middle of nowhere, but surrounded by rural homes. We go to college together, and I was kind of interested to know about Navajo tradition. The first day we stayed, it was pretty chill, nothing out of the ordinary, but then her grandmother, not that old, around 67, said that a stray dog came out of nowhere and wouldn't leave. To me, it did act kind of strange and was ugly looking, black, shaggy coat, looks like a mix between a German Shepherd and a lab. At night, we were watching a movie in the living room, had big windows that looked out into the front where the cars were parked, nothing fancy, with the curtains wide open. Grandma was in the kitchen cooking dinner and we were watching a movie. Next to the window is a medium bookshelf where the DVDs are kept. Karen went to put back a DVD we had just watched, but she freaked out because a stray black dog was staring at us through the window, standing on top of the wood box outside. Not something normal dogs do from my point of view, or hers. Usually my dog, which is a house dog, scratches the door to be let in. Res dogs aren't house dogs, and dogs inside the house are frowned upon in Navajo tradition, meant to protect the house and the owner. The other dogs seemed to stay away from it. Karen opened the door and yelled at it to get off the box. It ran off behind the shed. We went to Tuba City to get some groceries, came back to the house. The dog was nowhere to be seen, nothing unusual. Grandma went to visit some people, so it was just Karen and I. Around 5 o'clock, we heard someone trying to open the door. Both of us looked out since there had been no cars heard and no dogs barking. Looking out the living room window to the door, and there was the dog trying to open the door with his paws. 2 paws wrapped around the brass doorknob, standing on its hind legs. I thought that was weird, but wasn't really freaked out. Karen was. She opened the door and chased it off. Grandma came back later and Karen told her. Grandma didn't like what she heard. But we got ready to sleep. We slept in the spare room since it had 2 beds. One window with curtains opened a little. We turned off the lights, but there was a sound coming from the top of the roof. Pitter-patter footsteps and scratching sounds and panting. It then sounded like it jumped off onto the plastic water barrel they had. At first we heard what sounded like barking, but as it grew louder, the other dog seemed to be barking at something also. But all of a sudden, something was running around the house and barking, and it was no dog. Nope, it wasn't. This barking sounded human, a deep male voice barking like it knew that we knew it wasn't a dog. Karen decided to, in my opinion was stupid, open the curtains to look out. There was a last stray dog on its hind legs looking into our bedroom, but this time it stunk, and what I thought were 2 black holes in the necks, another pair of eyes twinkled. Think of those ugly, glossy spider eyes staring at you, and the paws were deformed-looking hands with overgrown, somewhat thick and sharp fingernails. Again, both screaming and shutting the curtains closed, Grandma came running through the door and seeing it. First thing she did was grab ashes from the fireplace, load 3 shells into the shotgun from under her bed, bless herself in Navajo, and went outside to shoot it, yelling in Navajo about how the thing wasn't welcome there and to get the hell out of there, for it to go to linger somewhere else. Then both being traditional, the next day they called a medicine man to come over and put cedar in. He prayed over everyone with cedar smoke and an eagle feather, blessed the place, made us eat bitter herbs called eagle gall or something, and gave me an arrowhead. Apparently I needed to carry one for protection, and a little pouch called corn pollen. Seems to work pretty well. The medicine man said that dog was a skinwalker, which in Navajo is a long word, but I call them Yoshis. The body of the stray dog, which was killed by the skinwalker, made an illusion so he wouldn't know it wasn't a real dog. He also said that Yoshis tend to harm people by using some sort of human bone straw to spit at someone. Think spitballs, only deadlier, and get human bones into them. Doctors can't detect it, but the medicine man that day pulled a piece of human skull out of Grandma's right shoulder, pretty big, 2 inches long and a centimeter thick. It was real because we watched him pull it out of her. That was intense. I live close to the reservation, just outside Mesa, Arizona. I have a couple of native friends who I just recently went camping with around 20 miles outside of the valley to a place they call 3 Poles. This place is considered to be holy land in their eyes and is close to a river. There are numerous stories I know about this place, such as the flute player you can hear at night or the boulder-sized splashes you hear in the river, but the most notable are the stories of the skinwalkers. We arrived at the camping site around 9 p.m. It was already dark, so we started to unpack and made a fire. Once that was done, my native buddies put up the barriers, puffed the smoke of tobacco upon us as a personal barrier. They told me never to go anywhere alone, and that around 3 a.m. is when the spirits are the most active. Around 2 a.m., the beating of a drum became very clear. This is a sign of a skinwalker, they told me. At around 3 a.m., the smell of wet dogs became apparent. This is a sign of either 2 things, Hoofy, an extremely evil spirit, or the skinwalkers. The fire grew small and we could see the shadows of animals. We all decided to move to another site in the morning. As the first light dawned, we packed. I sat in the back of his truck to hold down the stuff. As we left, I saw a Rottweiler walking on its hind leg straight to the middle of our camp. It was easily 5 foot tall and had bright orange eyes. I freaked out and screamed as it was running at us, still standing up. It disappeared into a bush after we turned the corner. Later on, at our other camp, an old man with his face covered by his hair visited us and acted very strangely. We ran out of drinks, so a friend and I decided to head out on foot. No car, a friend had taken it home. We saw a car. As it approached, it slowed down to a halt, and the same man asked if we wanted a ride. I said no, because by this time my friend had told me the man was a skinwalker. He grabbed my arm and pulled me by his car and looked straight at me. As my friend ran up to grab me, the man took off in his car. Once we got back, I relaxed. It was around dawn when just behind me the man appeared about 10 feet away and asked if I could help him with something back at his camp. As he did, 2 trucks came around the corner to head further into the grounds. He watched them as they passed, and all of a sudden he bolted after them. I was astonished to see this 60-year-old man chasing down a car. My native friend put up a salt barrier. I heard sounds all night, but never saw anything after that. And that is all of the stories that I have for you this time. I kind of enjoyed researching this and reading some of the stories. Some of them were a little bit goofy, but overall I really enjoyed this. And I think I might make it so that maybe once a month or once every 2 months I might do another one where I just tell other people's stories. So if you have a story, feel free to email me. I might not use it, but I'm really interested to see other people's experiences. Emails in the description box. As promised, I did say that I would give y'all an update about me and what's been happening and why I disappeared. So there are actually a lot of reasons, as you could assume. At the time that I stopped posting, I let you guys know that my parents' dog, Maverick, was having seizures. Well, that day I stopped posting. I was about to start recording that video when he had another seizure, and it was one of the most intense ones he's had so far. Nat took my focus along with everyone else's in the house. For the record, he is okay. Here's a picture of him. He does have epilepsy, which I guess is common for huskies, which he is. He's on meds and has not had another seizure, so he's okay. My hiatus was also in large part due to my health. I am a disabled person, so with that comes a lot of doctor's appointments, medication changes, and overall just being constantly drained. So it is hard at times to keep up with hobbies of any kind. I have been working on getting my mental health to a good place. I have new meds that have been helping. I've also been working on my physical health as much as possible. I'm currently being shuffled around from doctor to doctor for my shoulder issues, but I am hoping to have an answer soon enough. But there is a chance that it will include surgery, so that's not great. But I do what I need to do for my health, and I recommend that for everyone. A few questions from some comments in videos past. I was asked if I have a Twitter. I do, but I don't use it. I made accounts on Threads and Blue Sky as well, and I'll put the usernames on screen if you want to follow me there. Not sure what or if I'll even post there, but if you want it, it's there. I also was asked if I have a PO box, and the answer is yes, I do. I'm not quite ready to just post it in the description box yet, but I do respond to emails and DMs. If anyone wants to inquire about that info, feel free. Speaking of DMs though, one last thing before I end this video. Thank you so much to the subscriber who reached out to me and checked on me. You are super awesome. I didn't expect it, but you were super kind and I really appreciated that. So yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any specific cryptids or mythological creatures or just generalized creatures that you want me to talk about, please let me know. If you have any stories, please email me. That would be really cool. But yeah, this week, tomorrow, I will be talking about the Hippo Bill for Misheard History, and then for Tea Time and True Crime, I'm going to be talking about the Circleville hate mail. So if any of that seems interesting to you, go ahead and check those out. I also should mention 2 upcoming projects that I am working on. One is my Zodiac series. I don't believe in astrology. Just telling y'all up front, don't believe in astrology. I know I'm a Capricorn, but that is the only part that I know. Don't know the sun moon thing. Don't know literally anything else. But I know that some people are interested in that when it comes to serial killers. They want to know their astrology and their zodiac, whatever. So there's that. But I want to do one series that involves zodiacs and astrology for those who are interested, and that will be starting this month. The video will be posted on the 19th, which is my mom's birthday, because that's really messed up of me to do, but that will be Capricorn, because that's what me and my mother are, and then it'll just go every month, whatever the sign is for that month, and then at the very end I will end with talking about the zodiac. Originally I was going to start with that, but that's a big project, and so that script is going to be long. And so I'm just going to give myself a little bit of an ease back into all of this. So yeah, Capricorn on the 19th. Dean Coral is the character, not the character, the man that I will be talking about. Other thing, that I have coming up that I'm super interested in. I'm super excited for, not interested in, excited for, and I hope that other people will be too. But I'm going to be doing a book review for The Wife Between Us. I love reading, obsessed with reading. It's one of my absolute favorite pastimes, and I do a lot of reading. I have way too many books. I need another bookcase. My books are just sat on top of my dresser right now. Anyway, so I love talking about books to my family. Like, I'll read a book and I'll tell them the whole I'll tell them the whole story so they don't have to read it. Super kind of me, I know. But I I like doing that, but obviously like, that gets very irritating, and like I understand that my family doesn't want to hear it every time. But I enjoy listening to book reviews on YouTube, and so I'm gonna make a book review. And I hate this book. So if you want to hear me talk about how much I hate this book, please check out that video or wait for that video to drop. I don't know when it'll drop. It is 24 pages long. My script is 24 pages long, and I have 112 screenshots of the quotes to add to that video. So it's gonna be quite a long video. I'm thinking like at least an hour long, maybe a little bit longer. But yeah, so that's just gonna be a breakdown of this book and all the things that I don't like about it. Um, but yeah, so that might be a thing that I continue to do as I read more books, or that I go back and reread books to kind of do this for, because I'm mildly hateful for newer books. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, I won't give you a release date for that yet. I'm hoping that is at the end of the month, but I know that's going to be a pain in the butt to record and edit and get ready to upload. So yeah, hopefully by the end of the month you have that one too. But I have talked a lot, so yeah, anyway, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye.